You don't belong here. People like you should be in hell. The HOA security guard roared in my face, his voice echoing across Lake Rancho, the land my family had nurtured for 3 generations. They assumed a warning sign and hollow threats could erase our legacy. What they didn't realize was that every word they hurled that day would become the very proof that would dismantle their case. That night, the unthinkable happened. The whole headquarters was sealed shut by a truth they never expected. This wasn't just about legalities. This was a revelation that would silence an entire community. But before we unravel the chaos, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Let's rewind to how it all began. I was elbow deep under the hood of my old pickup, buried in a battle with a stubborn alternator, when raised voices outside snapped my attention. You know that kind of shouting you just know it's aimed straight at you. Wiping the grease from my hands, I stepped out into the bright glare of the afternoon sun. Blocking my driveway stood 3 men dressed in makeshift official-looking uniforms. At the center was Rex Donovan, self-declared chief of security for the HOA. His towering frame cast a shadow over my front yard like a storm cloud. Flanking him were 2 younger men I'd never seen before, both in stiff polyester get-ups and identical frowns. "Connor Mitchell," Rex barked, his tone heavy with the kind of authority you pick up from binge-watching too many crime dramas. "You're in violation of HOA Code 23A, conducting unauthorized commercial and industrial activity creating visual disturbance in a residential zone." He flourished a pristine sheet of paper like it was some divine decree. The ink was still fresh. Even from several feet away, the smell told me the document hadn't existed long. Rex's eyes gleamed with a bully's satisfaction, alike he believed he had me cornered. But something about his delivery didn't sit right. He kept glancing at his phone, almost as if he were reading a script he barely understood. "What commercial activity?" I asked, genuinely lost. I motioned toward the solar panel system I'd been helping my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, install. "It's a clean energy project, not some industrial hazard." The irony wasn't lost on me. Rex, in his dollar store uniform, preaching about visual pollution. The man had all the design sense of a concrete slab. His face flushed a deep purple. Without warning, he stormed over to my tools and began stomping on the panels. The sharp crack of delicate tech hitting the concrete made me wince, but I bit down on my reaction. "These are commercial-grade panels," he growled, delivering another kick that sent a $2,000 inverter skidding across the pavement. "You've got 15 grand worth of violations right here." One of his minions pulled out a phone and started recording. Rex shifted into performance mode, suddenly acting like he was starring in some reality show called Neighborhood Enforcers. "Then show me the rule," I said, keeping my tone steady even though fury trembled in my hands. "I want to see the actual HOA clause that bans solar installations." This land wasn't just property, it was my family's heritage. My grandfather came back from Korea and made a life here. My father taught me everything I knew about engines and self-reliance right in that garage. I wasn't about to let some cosplay cop drive me off the land my family had owned for 70 years. Rex fiddled with his phone again, then handed over another freshly printed page. "Section 23A, subsection 4, he read aloud. "An HOA resident shall engage in commercial industrial activities that create visual blight or environmental hazards within the residential community." He read the words like they were completely new to him. When I reached to inspect the paper, he yanked it away like a teenager guarding a fake ID. That's when Karen Westfield decided to make her dramatic entrance. Karen treated every inconvenience as a direct assault on her suburban utopia. She marched across her lawn, clutching a clipboard like it was both weapon and holy scripture. "I've been documenting everything," she declared, her shrill voice slicing through the air. "Those solar panels are giving Precious anxiety attacks. My vet says the radiation's damaging her chakras." Precious, a jittery little chihuahua, had been neurotic long before I moved in. Karen thrust a petition in my face, demanding $5,000 to cover therapy and spiritual recovery for her supposedly traumatized dog. I had to fight back laughter. It was clear she'd scavenged half the terminology off the internet in a late-night frenzy. As absurd as her claims were, they almost distracted me from Rex, who still loomed by my damaged gear, ready to destroy more. But something about that paper he'd shown me gnawed at the edges of my mind. It was too clean. Not a crease, not a fingerprint. And Rex kept his eyes glued to it like he was reading a monologue, not quoting a rule he supposedly knew. I slid my phone from my pocket and hit record discreet, just in case. When was this regulation enacted? I asked. Rex checked his phone before answering. Since the HOA update in March. That was odd. I'd lived here 5 years and never heard about any new updates. I'd been installing systems like this for 2 years without a peep. The timing felt far too convenient, almost like someone had written this rule specifically with me in mind. As Rex ramped up his theatrics, I studied him closely of the way he clutched the document, his glances at his phone, his inability to quote a single rule from memory. Something wasn't right. Sure, I could replace the solar panels, but if someone was forging regulations just to target residents, that was a much bigger issue than one ruined driveway. And that night, when I opened up one of my grandfather's old storage trunks in our damp, forgotten basement, I found something that would flip the entire situation on its head. The basement felt like a time capsule, 3 generations of Mitchell history packed into aging cardboard boxes, each one meticulously labeled in my grandfather's tight, neat handwriting. I'd explored this place plenty of times as a kid, but tonight I had a mission. I was searching for something specific, the original HOA documents, property records, anything that could confirm or debunk Rex's mysterious Regulation 23A. My grandfather had been fanatical about record-keeping, a habit rooted in his military background. That obsessive organization might be the very thing to save me now. After an hour of digging through stacks of old manila folders, I found what I needed at a founding Lake Ranch Homeowners Association charter, dated 1987 and signed by 12 original families, including ours. I laid the aged documents across the workbench beneath the dim flicker of a bare bulb. Each page detailed guidelines about fences, lawns, and paint colors, but not a single mention of commercial or industrial activity. In fact, there wasn't even a Section 23. The rules stopped at Section 19, which was about holiday decorations. It was either a complete fabrication by Rex, or someone had gone to great lengths to rewrite the neighborhood's bylaws. But what really caught my attention was the physical document Rex had waved around earlier. I pulled it from my jacket pocket and examined it using the magnifying glass I usually reserved for circuit boards. Under the lens, a watermark emerged, a complex pattern that clearly didn't belong to any standard print or paper. I snapped a photo of it and called my family attorney, Thomas Brady. Even though it was nearly 10 p.m., I didn't hesitate. Brady had handled my father's estate and had a sharp eye for spotting forged documents. "Jake," his raspy voice crackled through the phone, "that watermark you sent a Cascade Premium Paper Company. They only supply high-end commercial printers. No way a local HOA is using that stock. Someone spent real money to make those fake rules look official." The next morning, Brady and I drove across town to Cascade's distribution center. A jittery manager named Phillips confirmed what we feared. "Yeah," he said, scrolling through records, "we sold 500 sheets of that specific stock last week. Rush order. Paid in cash. The buyer, Mountain View Printing Solutions, a tiny outfit in a strip mall wedged between a pawn shop and a nail salon." Phillips raised an eyebrow. "They asked for enough paper to print 200 full documents. Kinda overkill for a neighborhood newsletter, don't you think?" When we asked for the address, Phillips hesitated. "They said it was for HOA updates across 15 communities, each one in a limestone-heavy region." We drove straight to Mountain View Printing. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the '90s. The owner, a twitchy guy named Danny, greeted us with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tax auditors. At first, Danny claimed he didn't remember anything, but Brady had a talent for asking questions that made people sweat. Within minutes, Danny caved and produced a work order. "Look," he said, pulling a carbon copy from a dusty drawer. "They paid triple-hour rate for same-day service." A woman brought in a template and a list of different communities to print at the top of each set. Said they were standard updates. I scanned the margin of the work order and my blood ran cold. Scribbled in pen were the words, "Target limestone areas with potential underground value. Phase 2 mining prep." This wasn't just about HOA drama anymore. Someone was deliberately targeting communities like Lake Ranch, places built on very specific terrain. Brady snapped photos while Danny chain-smoked and insisted he knew nothing else. The woman had paid in cash and used a fake name. On the drive home, Brady's tone was deadly serious. "Jake, this isn't just about you. This is a coordinated effort. They're investing real money and effort to make this look legit. We need to figure out what makes your neighborhood worth this kind of scheme." A pattern was forming, but I didn't yet have the full picture. What exactly made Lake Ranch so valuable, and who had the resources to forge documents for dozens of communities? When I got back home, someone was waiting for me on the porch. Maggie Thornfield. She stood there like she owned the night up, perfectly put together, even at this late hour, her makeup flawless, her smile sharp. "Connor," she purred, her voice like sugar mixed with something you couldn't quite trust. "I heard about the unfortunate incident with Rex. Maybe we could chat over coffee tomorrow? I'm sure we can work this out peacefully." There was something calculating behind her gaze, like she was trying to predict my every move. Meanwhile, Karen had taken her solar vendetta to the internet. She'd launched a TikTok account called Solar Truth Warrior, uploading a 10-minute rant titled "How My Neighbor Destroyed My Dog's Sanity with Electromagnetic Terrorism." It had about 50 views. 3 of them were comments mocking her scientific know-how. In the video, she held Precious up to the camera, dramatically explaining how radiation particles made the dog bark at shadows and refuse gluten-free treats. But Maggie's offer of coffee the next morning, that would lead to a truth I never anticipated, a one that revealed exactly why they wanted me out of Lake Ranch. We met at Cedar Creek Coffee, a warm little shop downtown. Maggie was already seated when I arrived, dressed in a designer blazer that probably cost more than my truck. She stood to greet me, extending a perfectly manicured hand and flashing that photo-op smile. "Connor, thank you for meeting with me. I really hope we can resolve this little misunderstanding," she said, her southern drawl flickering in and out like a weak signal. I made a mental note of that inconsistency. We ordered our drinks, and Maggie began what was clearly a well-rehearsed monologue about unity, aesthetics, and property values. But I wasn't really listening, I was studying her. Under the harsh coffee shop lighting, I noticed details I hadn't before. Tiny scars tucked behind her ears. Subtle ones, nearly invisibly broken bar unless you knew where to look. And then, the bridge of her nose. Her nose had that unsettlingly precise straightness you only get from surgical tools. And her skin was just a little too taut, and not from good skincare, but from a professional's scalpel. The most telling detail, though, was how her facial movements didn't quite align with the expression she was trying to make. It was like her muscles hadn't fully learned the choreography of her new face. "You know, Connor," Maggie said, leaning in like she was about to share a state secret, "Lake Ranch sits atop a rather fascinating geological foundation. The limestone here is exceptionally pure." Her tone was confident, too confident. She rattled off information about sedimentary layers, even mentioned their depth, nearly 45 meters. That figure stopped me cold. Casual HOA board members don't usually know subsurface geology down to the meter. This wasn't trivia from a gardening pamphlet. Maggie had clearly done her homework, a broken bar, or had it done for her. Before I could ask how she came by that knowledge, her phone rang. She answered without hesitation. "Tyler, honey, everything okay?" Gone was the southern accent. In its place was something sharper, faster, East Coast, maybe Boston or New York. She caught herself almost immediately, forcing a chuckle. "Oh, sorry, that's my friend's kid. He calls when he needs help with homework." But the mask had slipped, even if only for a moment. I'd heard Maggie's real voice, the one she'd hidden for the last 3 years. It was nothing like the sweet drawl she used for home meetings and block parties. I left that awkward coffee meeting with more questions than answers and drove straight to Dr. Iris Chen's place. She was our newest neighbor, a soft-spoken archaeologist who'd moved in about 6 months ago to study the local Native American history. We'd bonded over a shared respect for preservation when I helped her haul excavation equipment into her garage. When she opened the door, she looked like she'd just uncovered a lost tomb. "Connor, perfect timing. I was just about to call you. I found something you'll want to see." She led me to her garage, which had been transformed into a fully functional lab. Maps, soil samples, and testing equipment were scattered across every surface. "I've been collecting samples around the neighborhood," she explained, pointing at a pin-covered map. "But it's not artifacts I've been finding, it's evidence of something else." She handed me a report, thick with lab data and technical jargon. I couldn't make sense of most of it, but the headline was clear. Someone had been drilling test holes throughout Lake Rancho, 3 of them, each 30 meters deep. They'd been disguised carefully, but not well enough to fool someone like Iris. "Unauthorized geological testing?" I asked, already suspecting who was behind it. She nodded, then retrieved another document from her desk. "There's more. I came across this invoice when I stopped by the HOA office last week to ask about garden permits. It was mixed in with the regular file, probably left out by mistake." The invoice was from a Nevada-based geological survey firm. It listed a $50,000 charge for subsurface evaluations and mineral analyses conducted just 2 months ago. I took photos of every page, my mind racing. First, forged HOA bylaws, then hidden surveys, now a 5-figure mineral report. Whoever was behind this wasn't just testing the ground, they were preparing to profit from it, and they were doing it under our noses. I turned back to Iris. "Have you found anything else, any other signs of underground activity?" She hesitated, then pulled up satellite images on her computer, time-lapse photos of the neighborhood, taken 2 years apart. "See these discoloration patterns?" she said, pointing to several spots on the map. "Those are signs of soil disturbance. Someone's been working the land and covering their tracks." That same evening, Rex escalated things. He began what he called enhanced patrols around my home. Motion-activated cameras appeared overnight on trees just beyond my property line. His truck drove by every 2 hours, like clockwork. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It felt organized, strategic, professional. After dinner, I checked the mail and saw Rex parked across the street, snapping photos of me with a camera lens that looked like it belonged on a wildlife documentary shoot, not a neighborhood watchman's rig. That's when I decided to take a closer look at his truck. While he was glued to his camera, I slipped over and quietly opened the unlocked driver's door. Either he thought no one would dare touch it, or he was just that careless. I rummaged through the dashboard papers, pushing aside fast food wrappers and unpaid tickets. There it was, a receipt from Nevada Geological Services, dated just 3 weeks ago. Another $50,000 invoice, this one labeled for Phase 2 geological testing in lithium deposit evaluation. The client, Mountain Vista Development LLC. Everything clicked at once. The next day, Iris completed her latest soil analysis, and what she found confirmed our worst fear. Lake Ranch wasn't just sitting on limestone. It was built above an untapped vein of lithium, a mineral so valuable it was worth fabricating laws and harassing homeowners. Early that morning, my phone rang. Iris's voice came through, tense with both excitement and dread. "Connor, you need to get over here, now. The new results just came in, and what's under Lake Rancho, it's going to change everything." Everything changed that morning. I threw on yesterday's clothes and jogged the 3 blocks to Iris's house, my thoughts spinning faster than my legs. When she opened the door, her face was pale, lit by the soft glow of early daylight. She held a lab report like it was a classified dossier. Back in her garage lab, Iris unrolled the analysis on her work table with the kind of care you'd expect from someone revealing ancient scrolls. "Connor, the lithium levels in these samples are beyond extraordinary," she said, her voice trembling. "We're seeing concentrations 300 times higher than the natural baseline." She pointed to a colorful array of charts and graphs that looked more like modern art than science to me, but her tone left no room for doubt. At these concentrations and cross-referencing with the regional geological data, Lake Ranch is sitting on a lithium reserve large enough to supply batteries for 50,000 Teslas. That number alone hit like a gut punch. At the current rate of $80,000 a ton, she estimated the value at somewhere around $500 million. Suddenly, everything clicked. Rex's high-end surveillance equipment, Maggie's casual geology lecture, the fake HOA regulations. None of it seemed excessive now. It all made sense. No wonder someone would shell out tens of thousands to fabricate regulations, I muttered, staring at the mineral content breakdown. But how did they know all this before we did? Iris opened a second folder, This one filled with what looked like internal state documents. "This is where it gets interesting," she said. "I reached out to contacts at the State Geological Bureau. Turns out, a company called Extreme Mining Solutions filed preliminary exploration permits for this region 2 years ago." My stomach turned. "Extra Mining? That's the logo I saw on Maggie's ring." Iris nodded gravely and slid a printout across the table. It was from the State Mining Commission's online database. They're the biggest lithium extraction firm in the western U.S. and according to the permits, they've known about this deposit since 2022, which begged a much bigger question. Who exactly was Maggie Thornfield and why was she pretending to be a friendly neighborhood retiree while connected to a major mining corporation? That afternoon, I made a move that could either blow the lid off the entire operation or land me in legal hot water. I hired Jake Morrison, a private investigator Brady often used in insurance fraud and messy divorce cases. Morrison was a no-nonsense ex-cop with tired eyes and a sharp sense of smell for lies. He didn't flinch when I laid everything out. "Give me 2 days and $500, he said. "If your hoe queen is hiding something, I'll find it." 2 days later, Morrison called me and what he found was staggering. "Connor, your neighbor, Victoria Thornfield, she didn't exist before 2021, no credit report, no job history, not even a student loan. It's like someone dropped her into the world 3 years ago." He paused, clearly savoring the moment. "But here's the kicker: I found medical records from a private surgical clinic in São Paulo, Brazil. Facial reconstruction, early 2021, patient name, Margaret Elizabeth Cross. And guess what? The before and after photos match your Maggie perfectly." He followed up with a news clipping that nearly made me drop my phone. The headline: "Governor caught in scandal, secret affair exposed, wife files for divorce." The accompanying photo showed a woman who looked nothing like Maggie, but underneath the cosmetic surgery, the bone structure was unmistakable. Margaret Cross had been a geology consultant and the governor's mistress. The scandal had forced her to vanish from public life. "There's more," Morrison said. "She had a kid with the governor, Tyler, age 16. He's living at a private academy in Switzerland. Everything paid for by daddy." I stared at the screen, still struggling to reconcile the Maggie I thought I knew with the woman in the article. The transformation had been extensive, but once I knew the truth, I could see the fragments of the original woman peeking through the polished mask. This wasn't just about Greta, it was about legacy. About securing a future for a son who'd been buried by scandal and sent into quiet exile. That night, I decided to dig deeper digitally. Using tricks I'd learned back when I worked on network security systems, I found a glaring hole in the HOA email portal's password recovery system. A middle schooler could have cracked it. What I found in Maggie's archived inbox confirmed everything and revealed a side of the story I hadn't anticipated. Buried among budget reports and landscaping complaints were love letters. Dozens of them, all signed Dick, and all referencing their son, Tyler. One in particular stood out. Dated just 2 weeks ago. "Tyler needs this, Dick. After everything your wife did to USA, he deserves the world. Lake Ranch will give him that. 500 million means he'll never have to ask anyone for anything again." And then, the reply clearly from Governor Blackwood: "Margaret, I can't be directly involved, but the Cayman accounts are ready. Just make sure it all looks legit. Tyler's future is riding on this." But Iris had uncovered something even more explosive. In the midst of her archaeological work, she had discovered the faint outlines of something buried far older than lithium. A 1,000-year-old Cherokee settlement, complete with burial mounds and ceremonial relics, and under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, that changed everything. If confirmed, the entire site would be federally protected, meaning any attempt at mining would be permanently shut down. "Connor," Iris said, her voice low and steady as she laid out the pottery shards and arrowheads beneath her lab lights, "this land isn't just rich in lithium, it's sacred ground protected by federal law since 1990. The significance of what she was saying hit me immediately. We weren't just dealing with a valuable resource, we were standing on a site of cultural and historical importance. The very next day, Maggie convened an emergency home meeting. "Your accusation, that I was hoarding hazardous materials and posed a danger to the community. It was a blatant smear," a last-ditch effort to turn the neighborhood against me. She was accelerating her plans, likely aware that the foundation of her scheme was starting to crack. What she didn't know was that I had a plan of my own and a guest list that would completely upend her narrative. That morning, I met with Brady in his office, where we reviewed our strategy like generals preparing for battle. The conference table was buried under layers of paperwork, illegal filings, photographs, digital evidence. It was the product of months of quiet digging and 2 weeks of relentless investigation. Brady had that gleam in his eye, the one seasoned lawyers get when they're about to dismantle a case brick by brick. But there was also a shadow of concern. This wasn't just about Maggie anymore. "Jake, this conspiracy runs straight to the governor's office," he said. "We're not just looking at a shady HOA operation. We're talking about crimes that could bring down a state's administration of fraud, money laundering, public corruption. But our most powerful move wasn't legal or technological, it was ancestral." Through Brady's research, we discovered that my family line included Cherokee heritage going back 4 generations through my grandfather's military records. That gave me standing under federal law to intervene in the protection of sacred lands. Brady pulled up the law on his laptop. Under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, any documented descendant of a recognized tribe can request emergency protection for ceremonial or burial sites. Once filed, all commercial activity on the land halts. It can take years to resolve. But that wasn't the biggest revelation. Brady's deep dive into financial records uncovered something staggering. Governor Richard Blackwood had funneled $50 million into Cayman Island accounts, using shell corporations identical to those Maggie had used to acquire Lake Ranch properties. "The whole operation is connected," Brady said, gesturing at the tangled web of bank transfers, property transactions, and forged permits. "Everything traces back to the governor. Wire transfers, dummy companies, offshore holdings, and it's all tied together." He laid out copies of bank statements and corporate registries, all clearly implicating the governor in a massive laundering operation. But the smoking gun remained the email exchange between Maggie and Blackwood, retrieved from the compromised HOA server and verified by Brady's forensic team. In one message, Maggie had written, "Tyler calls me every night, asking when he can come home. I tell him, mommy is building something that will change our lives. This lithium mine will give him back everything your wife took from us." The governor's reply was equally damning. "Margaret, $50 million is just the beginning. Once the mine's in full swing, Tyler will inherit more wealth than my family's made in generations." That afternoon, Brady made the call that would shift everything into high gear. He contacted the Cherokee Nation's legal team, who quickly arranged for Elder Joseph Running Bear to attend the home meeting that night. Elder Joseph was a revered figure in tribal preservation efforts, known for standing his ground against corporate encroachment across several states. When I spoke to him, his words were firm and clear. "This land has been sacred to our people for over 1,000 years. If the evidence you found is real, federal law demands we act now. No mining, no development, and none of it can proceed." While Brady finalized the legal motions, I was grappling with the human toll of what we were about to expose. The danger no longer felt theoretical. Maggie wasn't just a con artist, she was a mother with powerful allies and nothing left to lose. The stakes had grown larger than property lines or HOA regulations. I started double-checking door locks, watching passing cars too long, and walking to the mailbox with a sense of unease. That evening, as dusk fell, I noticed something through Maggie's home office window with the faint blue glow of a video call. She was speaking to Tyler. I could hear her voice carrying across the backyard. "She's doing all of this for him," I realized, "so he wouldn't have to live the life she did." I heard her one night, her voice cracking, blending English with what sounded like Vietnamese. I couldn't be certain, but the emotion was unmistakable. For a moment, just one, I felt something close to sympathy, almost. Brady, however, wasn't finished. Without telling me, he had already submitted everything, our entire evidence dossier, to both the FBI's Public Corruption Division and the EPA's Criminal Investigations Unit. "Jake," he said, "by the time tonight's meeting begins, federal agents will already be preparing arrest warrants for Margaret Cross and Governor Blackwood." We weren't just going to confront Maggie at an home meeting. We were about to ignite a federal investigation that could topple a state government. Then, as if the universe wanted to gift us one more piece of evidence, Rex screwed up in spectacular fashion. At around 3 a.m., Karen Westfield, still haunted by her imagined exposure to solar panel radiation, was walking her neurotic chihuahua when she spotted Rex digging a hole in her garden. Terrified, she called 911, claiming a murderer was burying evidence in her backyard. When officers arrived, they found Rex frantically trying to destroy artifacts, actual Native American relics Cyrus had cataloged days earlier, pottery shards, ceremonial items. He was smashing them with a shovel in a blind panic. The police report was practically a comedy script. Karen screaming, Rex stammering, 1,000-year-old artifacts in pieces on the lawn. But what mattered most was what the arrest revealed. Rex wasn't even officially employed by the HOA. He'd been hired as a security consultant through one of Maggie's shell companies. His background check turned up a record filled with shady dealings, tampering with evidence, harassing witnesses. His involvement suddenly looked far more deliberate and criminal. By the next morning, as I dressed for what I knew would be the most consequential meeting of my life, I realized something profound. We had everything. Enough to expose Maggie and Rex, enough to take down a network of corruption that reached all the way into the state's highest office. The corruption reached deep, far beyond our quiet neighborhood and straight into the upper tiers of state leadership. That night, the Lake Ranch Community Center swelled far beyond its modest capacity. What had been billed as a routine emergency home meeting quickly became the most talked about event in town. Over 60 residents crammed into a room meant for 30. Every seat taken, the rest standing shoulder to shoulder. The tension in the air was stifling, thick with the scent of burnt coffee and unease. I took a seat in the back row, feeling the collective weight of the crowd's gaze. At the front, Maggie stood confidently at the podium, dressed in a sharply tailored navy blazer that probably cost more than someone's mortgage payment. Her surgically sculpted face was fixed in an expression of manufactured poise, the kind worn by people convinced they were still in control. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her faux southern drawl dripping with practiced charm. "We're gathered here tonight to address a very real and pressing threat to the safety of our community and its property values." Then she dropped the bomb. "Mr. Connor Mitchell has been storing hazardous materials on his property, items that, in my professional opinion, could be considered explosive in nature. He's endangering every single family in Lake Ranch." Her arm extended toward me with a theatrical flourish. I could feel the mood in the room shift as people turned to look at me. Some even edged their chairs farther away. But this time, Rex Donovan wasn't there to stand behind her like a hired shadow. He'd spent the night in a county jail cell, trying to explain to baffled officers why he'd been caught destroying Native American relics in someone else's garden in the dead of night. His absence rattled Maggie. I could see her glance nervously at the empty chair where he should have been. Still, she forged ahead, producing blown-up images of my solar array and describing the lithium-ion batteries as if they were weapons of mass destruction. That's when the double doors at the rear of the center creaked open loud enough to silence the room. In walked Linda Blackwood, poised, commanding, dressed like a woman who didn't just know the law, she was the law. She was flanked by 2 FBI agents and another man whose presence radiated federal authority. The hush was broken by the sharp sound of Maggie's coffee mug shattering on the tile floor. "Margaret Elizabeth Cross," Linda said, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. "You've been dodging accountability for 3 years. But this ends tonight." The change in Maggie was instant and devastating. Her polished exterior cracked under the pressure, the cultivated accent vanishing as she stammered in a voice that was all New York grit. "Linda, please, see, you don't understand. This is about Tyler. I'm doing this for our son. He deserves a future." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The illusion was broken. This woman, who had posed as a humble community leader for years, was suddenly exposed as desperate, vulnerable, and real. That's when Elder Joseph Running Bear stood. Draped in traditional Cherokee regalia, he brought a quiet but commanding presence to the room. "In accordance with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act," he declared, "this land holds sacred burial grounds protected under federal law. No mining or commercial activity may continue here now or ever." Then Special Agent Martinez stepped forward, holding a printed document and reading in a crisp, neutral tone, "Margaret Elizabeth Cross, you are hereby under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, environmental violations, money laundering, and infringing upon federally protected tribal lands." The agents moved in, securing the cuffs around her wrists. In that moment, Maggie seemed to wither, her face sagging under the collapse of everything she'd built. But we weren't done. I rose and addressed the stunned audience, my hands trembling but voice gaining strength. "For the past 3 months, I've been trying to understand why our HOA president was so desperate to remove me from my home. What I uncovered was a network of deceit, fake regulations, illegal mining surveys, and a plan to siphon nearly $500 million in lithium from the ground beneath our feet." I held up printed copies of the geological reports, forged HOA amendments, and shady financial transactions. But those documents now felt almost insignificant compared to what came next. Linda stepped forward, phone in hand. She tapped the screen, and a video began to play. A teenage boy appeared, Maggie's son, Tyler. "Mom, I get why you're doing this," he said, looking just off camera. "Dad promised us this, that lithium money, it's going to change everything. We'll finally get the life we deserve. No one can take that from us." The timestamp on the video was recent. It painted a damning picture, a mother and son conspiring to cash in on stolen land, no matter the cost. Dr. Iris Chen stepped forward then, holding pieces of pottery and stone arrowheads that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. "These artifacts are from a site known as Nvigodahe," she said. "In Cherokee, it means a sacred waters. This area has been considered holy for more than 1,000 years, and under federal law, it must remain protected." The crowd sat in stunned silence, processing the reality that their idyllic neighborhood was built on a sacred site. And then came Maggie's final unraveling. As the agents began escorting her away, she turned back to the crowd, tears streaking her once impervious face. Tears streamed down Maggie's carefully reconstructed face as she cried out, voice trembling with fury and desperation. "I did it all for Tyler," she shouted. "He deserved a future that wasn't poisoned by his father's cowardice or his stepmother's bitterness. This land could have given him back everything we lost. That money, it was supposed to be his right, his chance to escape this lie of a life we were forced to live." The room remained silent, shell-shocked and unable to process the sheer magnitude of what they'd just witnessed. For 3 years, they'd followed the rules, paid their dues, and placed their trust in a woman who, as it turned out, was never legally who she claimed to be. Her entire existence within Lake Ranch was an invention, a false identity built to execute a plan that would have stripped their neighborhood bare, mining it for lithium at the cost of their homes and heritage. All the HOA regulations, the dues, the governance, it had all been a smokescreen, a calculated, well-funded fraud designed to mask what would have been the largest mineral theft in Colorado's history. As agents led Maggie away in chains, Linda Blackwood turned back to address the crowd. "My husband's political career is over," she said, her voice flat with finality, "and he will face federal charges for his part in this deception. But I want to make something clear. The office of the governor was not aware of Margaret's plot to defraud your community. Richard's crimes were personal and financial, not sanctioned by the state. It was a strategic clarification, a one that likely saved Colorado from a constitutional crisis. But for the residents of Lake Ranch, it was little solace. They had been chess pieces in a game far bigger than they'd realized, and the game wasn't over." In the months that followed, revelations continued to surface, each one more unbelievable than the last. 6 months after that fateful night, I found myself standing in what was once Maggie's pristine backyard. It was now an active archaeological site, with federal teams delicately uncovering ancient pottery fragments dating back 1,000 years. Lake Ranch was unrecognizable. The transformation, both physical and emotional, was astounding. The path that led us here had been littered with betrayals and shocks, but as sunlight filtered over the excavation site, I was struck by how different everything looked when you finally understood what lay hidden beneath the surface. The federal investigation had exposed a conspiracy so massive, our little HOA drama now seemed like the smallest piece of it. Margaret Cross, her real name, as we came to learn, was only one player in a sprawling criminal network the FBI later named Operation Mineral Rights. At the heart of it was a secret coalition, 23 women, all former mistresses of high-profile politicians from a dozen states, each had been surgically altered, given new names, and financially backed to infiltrate quiet communities that sat atop valuable mineral reserves. For over 5 years, these women had wormed their way into local governance, staged fraudulent takeovers of HOAs, and secured illicit mining permits, ultimately stealing an estimated $3 billion in natural resources. Their operations were backed by a cabal of international mining corporations working hand-in-hand with corrupt government officials. The goal? To bypass environmental protections and violate tribal sovereignty without drawing federal attention. Maggie's connection to Governor Richard Blackwood had been just one strand of this sprawling web, but one that reached from suburban neighborhoods all the way to the highest rungs of state and federal power. When the full truth came out, it sparked the most sweeping public corruption probe since Watergate. Indictments spanned across 8 states, implicating over 40 individuals in a range of federal crimes. As for Governor Blackwood, his political fall was swift and irreversible. Evidence of his financial misconduct was irrefutably $50 million hidden in offshore accounts, permits illegally rubber-stamped through shell companies tied to his affairs. He was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for racketeering, money laundering, and violations of environmental and tribal protection laws. His disgrace was so profound that Colorado's legislature was compelled to pass sweeping ethics reforms, mandating full financial transparency for all elected officials and their immediate family. But the moment that stayed with me the most came during Margaret Cross's final court appearance. She was sentenced to life in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, she stood to speak, her voice barely more than a whisper, yet heavy with emotion. "I want Tyler to know I did all of this so he could have a future, one not stained by shame or abandonment," she said. "I thought that money could buy him a new name, a clean beginning, a life where he didn't have to live as the forgotten child of a powerful man who cast us aside." The judge showed no leniency. Margaret's crimes had endangered lives, violated the rights of an indigenous nation, and attempted to erase sacred ground for profit. Yet even amid the fallout, something unexpected happened. Tyler Cross, the boy at the heart of it all, emerged as a symbol of hope and healing in the wake of his mother's downfall. Now placed under federal witness protection, Tyler Cross sent a heartfelt letter to the residents of Lake Rancho, one that struck a powerful balance between sorrow and hope. "I want to sincerely apologize for my mother's actions and the harm she caused your community," the letter read. "I'm rejecting any money tied to her crimes, and I'm cooperating with federal prosecutors to help identify others harmed by this conspiracy. I hope that one day, I can return to Lake Ranch to visit the sacred Cherokee site she tried to erase. I need to understand what she was willing to give up for wealth that was never truly ours." The legal consequences extended well beyond Maggie. Rex Donovan, who had acted as an enforcer for the operation, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. His charges included intimidating witnesses, destroying federally protected archaeological sites, and conspiracy to commit fraud. During his trial, prosecutors revealed that Rex had participated in similar schemes across 4 other states, using coercion and threats to force residents off land rich in minerals. His arrest exposed a broader network of hired operatives, thugs employed to run harassment campaigns through HOAs. Their tactics were ruthless: drive down property values, scare homeowners into selling, and funnel the land through a series of shell corporations tied to the conspiracy. In the wake of it all, Lake Ranch underwent a transformation that few could have imagined. What was once a quiet suburban development was now designated a federally protected cultural heritage site. The National Park Service named it the Envigati Cultural Preserve, ensuring that no commercial development or mining would ever take place there again. Elder Joseph Running Bear was appointed as the site's first cultural director. He moved his family to Lake Ranch to lead the effort in reviving traditional Cherokee practices and safeguarding the ancient artifacts uncovered beneath the neighborhood. My own journey had taken a surprising turn as well. The federal government offered me a full-time role as the preserve's technical coordinator, responsible for managing infrastructure and security systems. The job came with stability and benefits, but more importantly, It gave me a reason to stay on the land my family had cherished for 3 generations. I had gone from fixing engines and wiring panels to protecting something sacred, and that gave me purpose I never expected. Dr. Iris Chen became the lead archaeologist for the site, heading up teams that uncovered new layers of Cherokee history with every dig. Her research revealed that Envigati had once been one of the most vital ceremonial hubs in the pre-Columbian Cherokee world, with over 1,500 years of continuous habitation. "We're not just digging up artifacts," she said during one of her community talks. "We're preserving a sacred place, a story of a people who knew the land's true worth long before anyone cared about mining claims or lithium rights." And then there was Karen Westfield. Once known for her paranoia and wild conspiracy theories, Karen had undergone the most unexpected transformation of all. Her accidental discovery of Rex-destroying archaeological remains had jarred her back to reality, curing her of many of her fears and delusions. Now rebranded as Chief Karen, she appointed herself as the preserve's unofficial tour guide, wearing what she claimed was traditional Cherokee attire, purchased online. Of course, she led daily walking tours filled with eccentric, often inaccurate narratives about ancient energy vortexes and solar radiation sanctuaries. Despite her historical inaccuracies and questionable fashion choices, tourists loved her enthusiasm. Her tours were packed, and she had become an odd but entertaining fixture in the newly reimagined community. The final, most poetic moment came during the dedication ceremony, when Elder Joseph shared a truth that shook me to my core. "Your grandfather knew this was sacred land," he said, standing beside the ancient ceremonial circle unearthed beneath what had once been the HOA clubhouse. Military records show he chose this exact location for a reason. He had served with Cherokee soldiers in Korea, and they told him about these lands where water flows through limestone caves. He was protecting this place, even if he didn't fully understand why. Standing in the shadow of the mountains, amidst a community that had weathered lies, loss, and corruption, I finally understood the lesson my grandfather had tried to pass down. Some things truly are worth more than money: a heritage, truth, and the bravery to stand for what's right, especially when powerful people insist you have no voice. The value of this land wasn't in its lithium reserves. Its true worth came from the connection it gave USA to history, to justice, and to a story far bigger than ourselves. Have you ever felt powerless against those who abuse their influence and try to take what's not theirs? Jake's story proves that you don't need wealth or connections to challenge even the most intricate conspiracies. Just perseverance, honesty, and the courage to stand your ground. Whether you're facing corporate fraud, community injustice, or personal betrayal, remember, the truth always has a way of rising. If Jake's journey inspired you to keep fighting for what's right, hit that like button and subscribe to Ya Stories for more unbelievable tales where justice wins out in the end. You made it to the finish line, which is more than we can say for Karen's fashion sense. Thanks for watching Ya Stories. Our team believes you've earned a medal, a broken bar, or at least a mailbox that doesn't come with a citation.